Your neighbor might be a Cuban spy. That's not an exaggeration. A recent 60 Minutes exposé in 2025 revealed that Cuban intelligence has been running spy networks inside the United States for decades, not in secret bunkers, but in plain suburban neighborhoods, hiding behind ordinary lives. For most Americans, Cuba is a small island with old cars and tourist beaches. But behind the palm trees lies one of the most sophisticated intelligence services in the world, quietly placing agents in U.S. communities, businesses, and even government offices. And the shocking truth? Some of these spies weren't caught for decades. They lived next door, went grocery shopping, attended church, and all the while funneled information back to Havana. So today, we're diving into the Cuban spy network living next door. How it works, who's been exposed, and why this tiny island nation has been able to outplay U.S. counterintelligence again and again. To understand Cuba's spy network, we need to go back to the Cold War. In 1959, Fidel Castro took power. Almost immediately, Cuba became the front line of U.S.-Soviet rivalry. The Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, CIA assassination attempts. Cuba was under siege, and its survival depended on intelligence. Out of that pressure, the Dirección de Inteligencia, DI, was born. Often called Castro's secret weapon, the DI was trained with help from the Soviet KGB. While the CIA had global reach, Cuba's intelligence focused heavily on the United States. And they got results. One of the most famous cases was Ana Montes. She wasn't some street-level informant. Montes was a senior analyst at the Pentagon, specializing in Latin America. For 16 years, she secretly worked for Cuban intelligence, feeding them classified U.S. military plans. She was only exposed in 2001, on the eve of 9/11, after the FBI finally closed in. To this day, experts call her one of the most damaging spies in U.S. history. But Montes wasn't alone. In the late 1990s, the FBI broke up the WASP network, also known as La Red Avispa. This was a group of Cuban agents operating in Florida, some of them under deep cover as ordinary American residents. Their mission? Infiltrate Cuban exile groups, monitor U.S. military bases, and disrupt anti-Castro operations. The case became famous, inspiring books and even a Netflix movie. Here's what makes Cuba's espionage unique. It's not about money. Many spies for Cuba were motivated by ideology, sympathy for the revolution, resentment against U.S. policy, or a sense of shared identity. That made them harder to detect, because they weren't living lavishly or taking suspicious cash payments. They blended in. Fast forward to today, and the revelations keep coming. The 2025 60 Minutes report revealed that Cuban intelligence is still active inside the United States, with networks that survived the Cold War and adapted to the digital age. Some of the cases involve U.S. citizens who were quietly recruited decades ago. Others are newer, taking advantage of social networks, encrypted apps, and community groups. Cuban agents often present themselves as activists, academics, or cultural liaisons. Their cover stories make them seem harmless, even helpful, until investigators trace their contacts back to Havana. Why does Cuba invest so much in spying on the U.S.? The answer is survival. Cuba knows it can't match America's military or economy, but intelligence gives them leverage. By knowing what Washington is planning, by infiltrating exile groups in Miami, by feeding disinformation, Cuba has managed to punch far above its weight. And the DI is skilled. U.S. counterintelligence officers admit that Cuba often runs professional-grade tradecraft, dead drops, encrypted communication, long-term cover identities, techniques worthy of the KGB. The most alarming part is how long these spies can go undetected. Ana Montes worked at the Pentagon for 16 years. The WASP network operated for years in Florida. Even now, officials admit they don't know the full scope of Cuban infiltration. And unlike Russia or China, Cuba doesn't rely as heavily on cyber espionage. They focus on human intelligence, real people, face-to-face relationships, long-term manipulation. That makes them harder to catch with technical surveillance. For ordinary Americans, the unsettling reality is that some of these spies look exactly like your next-door neighbor. They mow the lawn, wave hello, and live quietly in the suburbs. But behind the curtain, they're collecting information, reporting on communities, and sometimes influencing politics. So what does all this mean for the rest of us? The Ministry of State Security has redefined what it means to be a superpower in espionage. With 600,000 employees, LinkedIn recruitment tactics, and global cyber reach, it is not just an agency. It is an empire of intelligence. For the West, the challenge is enormous. Protecting secrets is harder than ever when recruitment can start with a simple connection request. For ordinary professionals, the message is clear too. If you have skills or experience in sensitive industries, you may already be a target. Not in some smoky bar or embassy backroom, but on your laptop, in your living room. China's new super spies have changed the game. They've blurred the line between the digital world and the shadow world. And as this intelligence race heats up, one truth stands out. Espionage is no longer out of sight, in the dark. It's right in front of us, hiding in plain view. And the next time you get that unexpected LinkedIn message, remember, it might just be China's invisible hand reaching out.